Welcome to Evolved Sun. I'm Matt Finch, your host, and in today's episode, you'll be learning about two opposite polarities of consciousness, that is, the service to others or right-hand path, positive polarity, as well as the negative path or left-hand path, service to self polarity of consciousness. The purpose of third density is to make the choice of polarities. Will you open up to universal love and understand and accept and have compassion for others? Or will you block the heart chakra and universal love, and hypertrophy your ego and serve the self? Both are okay in the eyes of the one infinite creator. Long ago, we didn't have the third density veil of mind between the conscious and subconscious mind. Therefore, we didn't have soul amnesia. We didn't have amnesia about time-space, aka the inner planes, our soul life in between physical incarnations. The problem was that the mind-body spirits pre-veil in third density, they were progressing way too slowly in the eyes of the Logos. So the Logos created a new iteration where it put in a very thick veil of forgetfulness. This new iteration and implementation of the veil of forgetting led to the two polarities, service to self and service to others. Pre-veiled third density, there was only service to others. Everyone saw everyone else as the creator. They didn't have amnesia about their oneness, about their light, about the connection of all things, how everything is the one infinite creator, experiencing itself in infinite variety and infinite galaxies and worlds and experiences. Now that we have a built-in forgetting to third density, it is very easy for people to believe that they're separate biological personalities with brains and bodies and nothing else. So the purpose of third density is to make the choice and to preferably graduate to either fourth density positive or fourth density negative. 90% of all planetary harvests in the galaxy we are in are positive, and about 10% of all harvests in this galaxy are the negative polarity. Alright, and without further ado, we have two examples from history that are very famous examples to give you a really good idea of the positive path to the extreme and the negative path to the extreme. We'll be using Jesus the Christ as the positive polarity example and Genghis Khan as the negative polarity example. I'll be using as a resource for this episode the book called Living the Law of One 101, The Choice by Carla L. Ruckert of LL Research. I think you're really going to like this episode. Carla Ruckert was a mystical Christian, the trance channel for the raw contact, and an ongoing channel in the conscious channeling form with LL Research, where she would channel Quo and other Federation groups. Alright, so let's start off with Jesus Christ as an example of the positive polarity. This section starts off with a quote from Quo, a quote. We would ask you to think about who the self is in relation to the teacher known to you as Jesus. This entity's sense of self was such that when the entity was but a child, it studied and learned from its teachers. By the time it was a teenager, as this instrument would say, it was already considered a teacher. This entity had a sense of self that enabled it simply to do what it must, even when those about him did not understand. That sense of self carried this entity through a wandering ministry that was remarkable for the purity of its teaching. And yet, when the one known as Jesus was asked to describe the self, he said that he who sees me sees not me, but the Father. This entity had learned subtraction as well as addition, and he was content to be impersonal and to relinquish much of the earthly personality. Yet there can be no more sure-footed identity than that attitude which the one known as Jesus had. In thinking about positively polarized people with whom we are familiar here on earth, the first person who comes to my mind is Jesus the Christ. There is a problem with that. There is a huge amount of confusion surrounding this man. This is due to the way religions have tended to co-opt the image of Jesus. The negative and exclusionary words and intentions they sometimes put into his mouth do not match what his intentions may be inferred to be if we read his words carefully. Thomas Jefferson once created a kind of Bible for his own study made up only of the sayings of Jesus, as found in the Holy Bible. Jefferson presented his selections in Greek, Latin, French, and English, side by side. He did this to remove the influences of anyone but Jesus himself. I also have this bias as a mystical Christian. When someone asks me how to learn more about Jesus, I tell them to get a Bible with Jesus' words in red print. Many editions of the New Testament put all the words which Jesus himself said in red print. Reading only the red print cuts out the clutter of other voices. One loses a lot of narrative reading only the red print, but one gains a lot of clarity in seeing exactly what Jesus offered of his love and wisdom, as reported by witnesses and storytellers. The Jefferson Bible is available in paperback these days. Jesus' name in Aramaic is Jehoshua. His nickname was Jeshua. I think he'd appreciate people knowing his actual name. Jehoshua, Yeshua, Jesus, was the son of a carpenter and undoubtedly learned that trade at his father's side. However, he was also allowed to study the religion of his fathers and, by the age of 13, was able to discuss the learned texts with rabbis and hold his own ground. His adult ministry is marked by debates with the Jewish authority figures who felt that he had become a dangerous man. They felt he should respect all the ancient laws literally, while Jesus said that to love the Lord and to love one's neighbor as oneself was the whole of the law and the prophets, by which he meant the Old Testament's first 5 books, known as the Torah, plus the prophetic books of the Old Testament. Jesus was a rebel, but still he always seemed to win these debates with authority, until the last one, of course. Jesus was caught at last in a web of church and state politics. A political hot potato, he was abandoned to the cross in a fixed one-on-one contest. One man goes free, the other dies by crucifixion. The voice vote was offered by a bribed crowd, and Jesus walked to Golgotha and the cross while a murderer walked free. Jesus' service was informed by wisdom and intellectual exactitude. However, his teaching sprang from the open heart and depended primarily upon insight and inner understanding. He was an itinerant preacher for the last 3 years of his life. It is only in these 3 years that he emerges into history. He began his active ministry by joining his cousin, John the Baptist, in the desert, where John was preaching repentance and new life, and baptizing those who came to him in the wilderness as a symbol of that new life. John protested that Jesus should be baptizing him, but Jesus paid no attention and was baptized into new life by John. John's message was as harsh as his desert: repent, or the end is near. This is a feature of Jesus' ministry as well, that urgency for turning people on to the immediate rewards of repenting and returning to the Lord. From this time forward until his death, Jesus was on the road, talking to all who would listen and healing the sick. He wanted to alert everyone to the vision he had of an apocalypse coming soon. His message was gentle, simple, and revolutionary. Jesus' message is unconditional love. He asked people to love their neighbors as themselves. When asked who their neighbor was, Jesus told the story of a man of low estate who found an ailing stranger on the road and took him to a nearby inn, where he paid for medical assistance and for the man to stay until he had recovered. In another parable, Jesus talks about how he sees the world. This time he's telling a story of Judgment Day. He says that the righteous will be sitting at Jesus' right hand, and then he will say, "Come, O blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." In this story, the righteous are stumped. They say, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" Jesus says, "As long as you do it to one of the least of these, you did it to me." We are all one. We need to take care of us. Let us be a community of love. This is the basic message. Whatever the truth of his life, and its details are only half in focus at the best of times, the consciousness that is the essence of Jesus the Christ has touched and opened people's hearts for over 2,000 years. Genghis Khan is an example of the negative polarity path. Meritocracy is used to describe competitive societies that accept large inequalities of income, wealth, and status amongst the population as a function of perceived talent, merit, competence, motivation, and effort. Meritocracies reject the ideology of equality whilst embracing the doctrine of equal opportunity. Genghis Khan was called Temujin at his birth in Mongolia around 1162. He grew up poor and on the road, a nomad like all of his tribe. The Mongolian nations occupied land sandwiched between what we think of as the southern part of Russia and the lands south of Russia, such as Nepal and India. The Mongol nations had warred with each other ceaselessly for centuries. As a young man, Genghis Khan united them, ruthlessly and mercilessly eliminating his challengers among the tribes. He then took his united tribes into a wider campaign of conquest, and after 50 years of continuous battle, had created the Mongol Empire, the largest contiguous empire ever held by one ruler in the known history of Earth. It encompassed territory from Southeast Asia to the middle of Europe. The period of his empire is from 1206 to 1405. He himself did not expand the empire to its largest. This was done by his descendants. He also enabled the Mongol nations to defend themselves successfully against the Chinese dynasties of those times. The Mongol Empire was the most powerful superpower of the Middle Ages. Trade along the Silk Road, with safe travel along its length made possible on account of the intimidation of the vast empire by the Mongols, created a connection between the Orient and the Western world. Cultural exchanges created a growing richness of civilization for both East and West, as well as providing a handy route for the spread of the plague from Europe eastward into the Orient in the 15th century. Perhaps 30 million people were killed by Genghis Khan's forces during the 50 years of his continuous campaign. During that time, the population of China was cut in half. He found mass extermination of cities to be his favorite tactic for taking over nations. Since few cities enjoy the prospect of surrender, most cities he challenged were utterly destroyed. Those who did surrender were left alive, but made into vassals and slaves. The Mongols prided themselves on their iron constitutions, and fought in winter by preference because most other armies found winter's extremities of weather difficult. All males were inducted into the army, and honor was gained only by warfare. The habit of competition and warfare among the Mongols made Genghis Khan's method of meritocracy work. There was a constant reorganization of power, depending on success in combat. Discipline was extremely tight, so tight that in general, even poor and defenseless people were safe on the roads within the empire. Lapses in discipline were punished by death, even for small infractions. This was a reign of pure terror. Earth has not produced many examples of pure evil, Genghis Khan included, although the Ra group said that he did graduate in service to self, so his polarity must have been 5% service to others or less. He attempted to do positive things. He promoted trade, and his civil governance was productive of peace, although a cowed and intimidated peace. It can be said that this policy was merely useful in keeping his subjects under complete control. He himself believed he was serving the common good. However, he accepted as given that force and intimidation ruled, and fear was the key weapon. His idea of diplomacy was to let a city know that they had a choice. Either they could surrender or they could be destroyed. He was an excellent terrorist, and he promoted men who were able to follow his example. In the battles for northern China especially, he often slaughtered vast, innocent populations, even though they were not offering any resistance. This wholesale slaughter was of such proportions that the language of some areas changed from Iranian to Turkish. In some cases in China, so much destruction occurred that no records remain. No autobiography of this figure remains. He was a leader bred in poverty and hardship, and he is said to have been very distrustful by nature. Although once he accepted a subordinate ally, he was capable of maintaining the alliance. His life was warfare, and he died while on a campaign. He instructed his followers to bury him in a secret place. They did so, killing anyone who knew where he was buried and anyone who tried to find out. A probably mythical story tells of his followers diverting a river so that it passed over his grave, in order that the grave could never be found or disturbed. His grave's location has not been discovered to this day. Alright, thanks so much for listening. That concludes this episode. I hope you enjoyed learning about the positive and negative polarities through method of the examples of Jesus the Christ, aka Jehoshua or Jeshua, as well as Genghis Khan. And I don't know about you, but I just love learning about Jesus and making videos about Jesus and even Genghis Khan. Jesus for obvious reasons and Genghis Khan for reasons of teaching, of what not to do if you're on the positive path. Post any comments you have about this video down in the comments section below. Subscribe if you haven't already done so if you want to get more videos and episodes like this. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next episode. Take good care of yourself.